The U.S. responded to Japanese expansion in the Pacific by stopping the sale of oil to Japan. These actions angered Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. In October 1941, an envoy was sent to America to discuss an end to the U.S. sanctions on Japan. FDR refused to change his policy. As the talks continued into November, Tojo approved the departure of the Japanese fleet. The order was to sail east to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Pearl Harbor was an important base for America. It served as the access point to the Pacific Empire that was built 40 years earlier. In the early morning hours of December 7th, Japanese planes took off, their goal to cripple America's fleet. The Japanese fleet was stationed 230 miles north off the coast of Oahu. A radar station on the island could only detect objects 150 miles away. At 7:50 a.m. on December 7th, the radar station detected the planes. However, Pearl Harbor was expecting U.S. planes from California that morning. There was no concern. At 7:55 a.m., the first Japanese plane appeared. Shortly after, 360 Japanese warplanes began to bomb the fleet. There was no warning. At 8:10 a.m., the USS Arizona was hit by an 1,800-pound bomb. The explosion caused the ship to sink, trapping over 1,000 sailors. The two waves of enemy planes hit every ship at Pearl Harbor. All had sustained significant damage. However, all but the USS Arizona and the USS Utah were eventually salvaged and repaired. Despite the severity of the attack, the Japanese Navy had failed in their goal. Their main goal was to destroy the aircraft carriers that were at Pearl Harbor. However, the carriers were away on exercises that morning. The attack crippled the Pacific Fleet and forced America's entrance into the war. Admiral Yamamoto, who commanded the Japanese fleet, is believed to have said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant, and fill him with a terrible resolve." On December 8th, FDR addressed Congress, asking for a declaration of war against Japan.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The next day, Congress declared war on Japan. The attacks on Pearl Harbor upset and frightened Americans, especially those living on the West Coast. In 1942, FDR, using his wartime powers as Commander-in-Chief, issued Executive Order 9066. This authorized the relocation of anyone of Japanese background. More than 110,000 Japanese Americans were relocated into internment camps. It was argued to be for national security. However, many of the people in the camps had parents and grandparents who were citizens. Their only connection to Japan was their ethnicity. The people were forced from their homes and businesses. They were crowded into internment camps and guarded by soldiers. They lost possessions, and families were even divided. Many other Asian Americans were also relocated, not because they were Japanese, but because they looked Japanese. In 1942, Fred Korematsu, an interned Japanese American, challenged Executive Order 9066. He said it violated his civil rights and the rights of Japanese Americans. In 1944, the case went before the Supreme Court, with the question, did Order 9066 violate the rights of Japanese Americans? The Supreme Court ruled that the order was constitutional under the War Powers Clause of the Constitution. The attack on Pearl Harbor brought America into World War II. However, the mobilization and patriotism of the 1940s would finally end the Depression and secure America's role as a world power.